Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to share my screen, so just give me one moment, please, while I figure this all out.
Susan, your screen is not shared yet. Can you try again? Susan, do you hear me? Susan, do you hear me?
All right, I'm back. Experiencing technical issues. Hopefully you can see me. Perfect. Whoa. All right. Sorry about that. Always seems to be a technical problem. All right, so welcome again, and thank you for being patient. I really appreciate it. Today's session, we're going to talk about introduce yourself in your essays, essentially. So universities, business schools want to get to know who you are, and as a result, they essentially want to get to know you. So some of the questions that they ask are related to this. INSEAD, for example, asks that in 500 words, you give a candid description of yourself, who you are as a person, stressing the personal characteristics you feel to be your strengths and weaknesses, and the main factors which have influenced your personal development, giving examples when necessary. Wharton asked that in 400 words, taking into consideration your background, that could be personal, professional, and or academic, how you plan to make a specific, meaningful contribution to the Wharton community. Stanford also asks that in about 650 words or so, you tell the admission committee what matters most to you and why. As you can see from these examples, business school want to get to know you on a personal level. They want to know what makes you tick. They want to know what really drives you, what moves you to be here and in this point in your professional development. And to do that, it is also understood that there is no right answer to introducing yourself, of course, in the RSA. So successful applicants answer this question in a variety of ways, incorporating a variety of elements to successfully capture who they are as individuals, who they are as professionals, and what are their drivers. Some incorporate familial drivers as a driving force. Others, some incorporate their familial divides as a driving force to change the status quo. Others incorporate the role as a first-generation immigrant saddling the fence between two completely different worlds. And others allow their love of the planet, of the environment, to be their guiding force to writing their essays. So how does an applicant go about introducing oneself? How do you go about deciding which elements, which stories in your experience, in your lifetime, to incorporate into your writing to make a really compelling story. Now, a way to prepare yourself to answer this introduce yourself type of question is to first and foremost be introspective. You should reflect on your life's experiences. That be, your personal experiences, your academic and or professional experiences, and how those experiences have shaped who you are as an individual and as a professional, and how those experiences have influenced you to make various decisions in your life, including being here and now in your process to apply and gain admission to an MBA program. When you think about the people you are competing against for that spot at Harvard, Wharton, Kellogg, whichever school that is you're targeting, they, like you, are highly talented and ambitious professionals who managed to achieve quite a lot in the 5 years since their undergraduate career. When I check in on my clients after they've been admitted into a top-ranked institution and obviously attending the courses, they all express without fail how impressed they are with the cohort of that particular school. So obviously they themselves have had a compelling story that allowed them to be admitted and to be part of that cohort. So how do you differentiate enough in your application that you also become a part of that very impressive class? How do you set your experiences apart from the rest of the applicants? And how do you tell your story in an interesting and unique way that captures the interest of the admission committee? To differentiate your application, you require a strong qualitative presentation of the influences that drive you every single day. The influences that make you want to wake up in the morning and continue the grind. The influences that make you strive to develop and to become a stronger and more talented professional. Your target institution does not want only high performance in metrics. While metrics, of course, are important, especially if you are targeting top-ranked institutions, what they're looking for is high performers who have an intrinsic drive that motivates them to influence others and influence decisions. Someone who moves beyond the ego to be a team player, who can build strong relationships that last a lifetime, and someone who has a drive to make an impact on or in the world. They want individuals who really understand their role as a single entity impacting the world every single day. And they do that through telling a very compelling story in their applications to these target institutions. Now, universities share very little as it relates to how they evaluate candidates in the application process, making it very challenging to determine how you present yourself to the institution of your choice and what makes for a compelling narrative. What stories should you share? What stories do they care about? Now, institutions make this decision not because they are trying to be mysterious, but because they want to attract diversity. The moment they become specific, the moment they tell you exactly what they're looking for, the institution, the business school, loses that diversity element, because everyone will try to fit in the box that the institution has drawn. The institutions cannot imagine the experiences people have that are beyond their realm. So keeping the question very open-ended is really what attracts and what allows them to see all the different types of experiences individuals have that have shaped who they are as people. So a question that asks you to introduce yourself is precisely designed to draw out what makes you unique. Now, you are, of course, also here, and if in this session, to try and understand how you are going to introduce yourself. And if the institutions say precisely what you want, what they want to see in your application, you are going to precisely do that. You're going to precisely say what the institution is going to want to hear. And they sometimes will lose that the opportunity to really get to know individuals who have struggled a lot, who have had a variety of experiences that have influenced them in particular in various different ways. So while these questions, while these open-ended questions are very vague, capturing your unique story, spending the time to capture your unique story will differentiate you from the rest of the applicants. Not being competitive in your application, i.e. not submitting who you are to the admission committee in your application, will lead you to miss out on opportunities to gain admission to your dream school, which will set you on a path to a successful career, a career that you imagine leading to a professional life that you really care to build. I understand the perspective and frustration of being here and now, not knowing precisely how to present yourself in your applications. I am a graduate of NYU and Yale, and before my admission to both of those institutions, I was sitting in the same spot you are at, trying to figure it out. Since I have helped others navigate the admissions process, and 90% of the clients who follow my process have been admitted to a top 20 business school. Every client I work with initially feels precisely this way, precisely the way you do, overwhelmed with the admissions process and not knowing precisely what narratives to select in their life experiences that showcase a compelling story that entices the admission committee to invite them for an interview. So my goal today is to help lessen that anxiety. I have a proven curriculum that my clients follow, which begins with a self-reflection exercise. And regardless of which school you are applying to, whether that's the schools that I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, INSEAD, Wharton, and Stanford, or any other institution, I want to share 3 elements that in the application process that will help you in your self-reflection and answering the introduce yourself essay question in a compelling way. So the first thing I recommend that you do is that you reflect on your character. What makes you tick? Don Miller, who is a business coach, asks this question in a different way. What really upsets you? And then asks you to answer the question, why? According to Miller, if you are seriously bothered by something, be that the injustices in the world, the inequality in the workforce, by the way organizations handle sustainability. It typically means that the thing you are bothered by is touching a core value of yours. So, for example, I had a client who is really passionate about the environment, and all her work, including her activism, revolved around bringing about change in the environmental policy. So, her Introduce Yourself essay was about her core value of her concern for the environment and the things she did to essentially that drove her to make decisions to bring about change. So find the thing that really upsets you, that you would want to change in the world. That should be your core value. And I would encourage you in the introspection process that you really pay attention to patterns and stories that you have experiences, the more meaningful one, not every story, but the more meaningful ones to you. Because what differentiates a compelling story from a good story is the one that is genuine and the one that essentially touches the heart in some way, shape, or form. So examine the experiences in your life that have shaped your belief system as step number 2. That have shaped your values, that have shaped who you are. While you may be tempted to talk about every element in your life that has shaped you, it's really important to not think about the Introduce Yourself essay as an autobiography. You have limitations in space and what you can include. It is also important that you not speak in abstract terms. So no vague language, no alluding to something, as opposed to just saying, describing your experiences. So find a balance by including one example that best captures your value system and what drives you. And talk about that in very, very vivid language. Another successful client talked about her mother trying to persuade her into having a different career that was, quote unquote, suitable for a woman. Whereas she saw herself as someone who is capable to succeed in a quote unquote man's world. Her struggle between the immigrant mentality of, a woman having to have a safe job and what she really wanted, what the applicant really wanted to do, was weaved into her entire Introduce Yourself essay. So give one example of the influences of your value system and make the reader experience that value system, the things that drove you to go on this path by including very vivid language. Now, if you follow my work, you will know that just about everything, you will know my belief system, that just about everything in your application is tied to your goal. Is tied not to your immediate post MBA goal, but to your long-term vision. And that includes the Introduce Yourself essay. You should be able to speak about how this character value has influenced your professional decisions. For example, if your goal is working in finance and your character, who you are intrinsically, is very much concerned about sustainability, then the Introduce Yourself essay could be focused on how you imagine bringing about a sustainable lens to the finance world in your future role. I worked with another client who talked about how his divorced parents' different lifestyle made him comfortable being around different people. And by different people, from his experience, it was about individuals who are, salt of the earth type of individuals, and the other side being the opera goers, the metropolitan type of individuals. And as a result, he was comfortable speaking, or he developed an intrinsic value of speaking comfortably with highly technical individuals in highly technical fields, as well as speaking with C-suite executives, which connected him to his future role as a consultant. Make the connection for the reader, even if it's implicit, on the path your value system has carved out for you and how it connects to your future career. As I said, even if that is an implicit description, making those connections is going to really differentiate your introduce yourself essay to any others. Clearly articulate who you are by showcasing your character values. By showcasing your character and your values is absolutely essential to securing admission. While you do not want to confuse the reader with including several examples per essay question, you do want to incorporate as much as possible visual language and make the connection to how this character value has influenced your professional ambitions to be here and now, and at this point, seeking an MBA. Now, if you want to dive deeper into discussing your story, I want you to reach out to schedule a call. A link to essentially connect us will be on the comment section, or you can just essentially copy the or type the website that's on the screen, so that we can essentially be connected. Now, I want you to be excited about the admissions process. Yes, it is a lot of work and requires a lot of time to a lot of reflection and time to writing a compelling story. But as my father always said, anything worthwhile requires work. Otherwise, everyone would do it. So instead of feeling anxious about the work that is required and not knowing what to do, I want you to imagine getting that response from Stanford, from Wharton, Harvard, or INSEAD, or any other institution that you're targeting. And imagine getting that letter that says, "We are delighted to inform you of your admission to our institution." Keep that image in mind as you work on your applications, inspiring you to not give up on capturing your unique character, your unique value system, so the admission committee can really see what you bring to the table. A way to prepare yourself for this highly competitive admission landscape, and this year it is absolutely competitive, is by putting your best foot forward in articulating your story in a compelling way. This will enable you to obtain the best education for you and your career, which will open doors of opportunity to make significant impact, not only in your career progression, but also making a drastic impact in how the world functions and how businesses function. So I want you to take a minute before we go into Q&A to essentially reach out to have a 30-minute complimentary consultation about your goals and your essays and what experiences you're having. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and I'm going to move to some questions. Hopefully you have some. And bear with me, please. All right. All right, so there's a question here that asks about red flags such as gaps in employment, caregiver responsibilities, whether one can include them in the story or not. It depends on which school you're applying to. So you have obviously, and also essentially what your goal is. One can incorporate these elements in the introduce yourself essay if it's related to your future goal. So, if your goal is related to sort of, a caregiver type responsibilities in something that you're trying to do long term with that, then you can use that as a driver to showcase how you're going to do that. However, if it's not related to your goals, I would recommend that you talk about gaps in employment and probably as a result, caregiver responsibilities. And you place those and talk about those elements in the optional essay that most schools offer. Hopefully that helps. Yes, Navad, I can share that with you. So if you send me an email, I'm happy to share the PowerPoint presentation. Also, you can essentially just rewatch this YouTube video. Awesome. How should we incorporate the less than desirable grades in undergraduate degree in the admissions process? Yeah, so I don't believe in highlighting the negative as opposed to highlighting the positive. So I would not, this is my recommendation, of course, I would not incorporate your less than desirable grades into your application itself. Rather, I would, again, go back to the optional essay and talk about what happened in undergraduate that led to less than desirable grades. It's not essentially, I would just caution you to not justify the grades, rather just explain the influences as well as what have you learned as a result or since then that will make the admission committee essentially be able to say, okay, we understand that you were, young and didn't understand how to manage a lot of different components or whatever your reasons, whatever the explanation is, and that, we're able to move past those undesirable grades in undergraduate. Perfect. It's interview season. Yes. How much importance an interview holds in the overall application process? When the interview is done, is your whole application reviewed again, or the final decision is made primarily on your interview experience? It depends on the school, but most of it is essentially looking at the entire application one more time, because if you can imagine, there's a lot of individuals that are interviewed, and one only has so much brain capacity to remember what the stories and what the experiences were about. But once the interview is complete, essentially your interviewer, depending on who it is, but your interviewer is going to write a report on that interview session, what essentially they thought your strengths and weaknesses were, if they felt that that you would be a good candidate for that institution, etc. And that's evaluated with your entire application. Awesome. These are great questions. All right. Follow-up questions, any specific tips for online interviews? I'm assuming you mean being interviewed online by an admission committee. Because essentially all the interviews right now are being conducted online. So I would recommend that you, first and foremost, regardless of who you're interviewing, who you are being interviewed by, that you reread your application that you submitted in round one. And also prepare essentially, responses to very common questions like, walk me through your resume. What is your goal? Why are you applying to this particular institution? And have specific answers to that go beyond what you've incorporated already in your application itself. Even if you're being interviewed by someone who hasn't seen your entire application, it's an opportunity to really develop further your and talk further about why are you applying to that institution, why that institution is the right place for you. The other tip that I would offer you is just like anyone, no one wants to essentially be in a room who is essentially just asking questions to another person. You should also prepare to have questions for the interviewer. So if the interviewer is a current student, you can talk about the experiences that they've had in that institution. If the interviewer is an alumnus of that institution, you can ask about how something related about how the school has prepared them for their career. If it's admission officer, you can ask about how COVID has impacted, or whatever your interests are. Really prepare questions in advance that whose answers can't easily be found on the school's website. And why you want to do this is because you want to show the admission committee that you are essentially prepared for that conversation, that you understand it's important, that you are still really interested in being part of it, and you're trying to imagine making that final selection of the school that you're going to be attending, right? So if you have several admissions, that means that you will, at the end of the day, you will have to choose one of those institutions. So having questions just shows them that you are a really engaged person and that you're taking this process very seriously. Hopefully that helps. So I am working in a non-target boutique investment bank, which is not well known overseas. Will this impact my chances compared to applicants from well-known banks? Obviously, recognition matters because when a business school essentially looks at admitting individuals to their program, they are also looking at how they're going to be able to help them make that next transition. So what I would probably say, if your investment bank is small boutique bank that does not have a international presence, I would probably want to focus on all the opportunities that being at that organization has offered as a result to working for a big bank or working for a globally recognized institution that has hierarchies in place and you have limitations on how much you can take on. So in your experience, you kind of want to really amplify how much working for a smaller organization allowed you to really be a part of that organization's growth. So it really, I guess the answer is, it depends on how much experience and how much essentially opportunities that bank has offered you to grow. If it's very hierarchical and you don't have a lot of opportunities, then that may impede you from being admitted. All right. Do top business schools really review the application holistically, or do they have some set parameters based on different geographies? Curious because I'm from India, but not an engineer. They do actually review the application holistically. That said, if you belong to an overrepresented applicant pool, they also have their quota of how many applicants they're going to accept within that pool. So if you're not an engineer, that can work in your favor. because you're going to bring in a different perspective to the classroom that all the other, that belong to your demographic and are engineers may not be able to do. So really spend time to articulate, be introspective, as I mentioned in my presentation, be introspective and really share essentially the unique experiences that you have that are very different from other people that belong to the same demographic. Awesome. Any last minute tips for round 2 folks who are currently working on their essays? Yes, that is a great question. I would really encourage you to spend time on your application. Spend time reflecting on what makes you unique and capturing that. I would also encourage you to essentially ask someone you trust or even a stranger to read your material and make sure that it captures who you are. So ask the person to be brutally honest, because the only way you can improve your writing is if you know where you're falling short. If you give it to someone who just says, oh, this is wonderful, that's really not going to be of benefit to your application. You want someone who is going to essentially look at the material and say, this question or this comment or this sentence doesn't really add any value. It's not really capturing what you're trying to say. This element is not, it's a little confusing, or whatever the issue is. And, writers all over the place, all writers essentially have someone read their material before they submit it to publication or whatever, wherever they're trying to present their writing at. And the same thing for you. I would encourage you to reach out to someone to have that done, and do that early on, because preparing a strong written material requires several iterations. So if you leave things for last minute, last 2 weeks, you should be essentially in the last 2 weeks, you should be finalizing your material, because by that point there's the holidays and everything else, coming through, that you don't want the stresses of the deadline to really impact the quality of your submission. All right, any more questions? Perfect, thank you guys. This was wonderful, wonderful questions. If you have any questions, you want to talk about your profile, please feel free to reach out. We have some sessions, some space available to have conversations, and good luck with your applications, whether you're applying this year or next year, whenever you're applying. I wish you the best of luck. Thank you again.